So yeah, I'm sticking with my lines. Of course, as Doreen's noticed, I lose a lot, but that's okay because I know what I see, and I judge my judgment as far as getting my information correct. So I'm gonna go back to um, putting down the my middle tones to a point. Now, getting into my colors, my palette, I use a standard portrait palette, with some exceptions. I go crazy because the the zone method where you use either your primary colors, then your white and your black. I don't use that. There's so many colors out there. Why am I going to recreate something that's already there? So I buy tubes of paint. I experiment, and they tend to work, especially if it's for a certain object that's a certain color. Because by the time you get into it, if you really got crazy about your colors, all right, you're gonna say, I don't want to contaminate my color with a brush. So you switch a brush, you use the same brush with the same color, it just gets too much. so that's how I operate. It's like, hey, why waste my time when something already exists? Now, people like Max Ginsburg, he actually, he does definitely stick to his colors. He gets off on creating his own colors from scratch, and it's all fine and good. The zone method and all that. As you keep painting, you start to get into your own way of doing things, and you start leaving things that you picked up along the way, and you get comfortable with what you do. All right, so it's not a bad thing at all. Now, I'm gonna put in her lips because it's ruby red, and it's baiting me right now. so I'm gonna put that in. So I'm taking a little bit. I have a cadmium red deep here, and of course, the brand that I use, it's sometimes important because when you get the top brands, the pigment's nice and strong, and the tinting power, it really helps with your paints. But if you can't afford cadmium red from Harding or whatever, you buy the next best thing. This is a hue. This is cadmium red hue. So I'm going to use it. Now I'm going to put a little. The lips, as I noticed, it has a little bluish in there. So I'm going to take some permanent magenta. I'm going to kill it a little bit, or neutralize it a little bit with some white, titanium white. Now I did start talking about my palette. My palette, it's from warm to cool. So I start off with my whites, Naples yellow, my reds and stuff like that, and then I get into. It's funny. I change things around a little bit. I like my earth tones right in the middle of both of them. So, all right, there you go. That really helps. And one other thing I'm going to do is check my timing here. Wow, 45 minutes almost gone like that. It's 1:44. All right, so I'm going to start putting in some dark information, and like I said, I jump around, so it works for me that by the time I finish this stage, which is generally about 3 hours, I sit back and let it dry. This brush is too large for that. Okay, here we are. So I put in my darks so I can kind of understand more information. It's like trying to learn a different language, I suppose, right? because as you go along, you understand things better as you paint along. All right. I'm gonna move on to the second eye because it's the whole Cyclops thing is not working either. So, glasses on. Together, as we get older, we all know, man. Things we used to do. Now, of course, the lid is just one of those things. I don't want to get too dark underneath the second lid, the second bottom lid. So I'm going to just indicate that there is a ridge here with a lesser value color, and then I'm going to go a little red to try to indicate. Of course, I dabble a little bit with this to help the drying. I paint in the top of the lid with the red, and later on I'll blend it. But it's a softer, lesser value color. All right. Now, I'm gonna have my mold sticks here. I was gonna demonstrate this with using this. You make this yourself with dowel and whatnot and rags. So I do a lot of that. I have a huge one at home, but I want to just not use it because it's cumbersome. Now the challenge that I like sometimes, and it's kind of, I like having those paint outs where everyone is, it's studio space. And there's something that I'd like to do to get out there too. Just have a model and everyone gather around and just paint. And in the way that you're given like 3 hours to create something and come up with something. That seems like it's fun. So each session, you're gonna finish one painting one way or another. All right, so of course you try to mix your colors so that they, especially when it comes to eyes, there are some adjustments, but eyes should match, right? So you try to put that in. And the nature of the eyes, they're like, they're like a baseball or a.
They're round.
Yeah, so the dimension of that, you kind of have to try to paint that in. And as far as eyes too, they're a wet object. It's moisture. It's moist. So you have to, when you paint eyes, you have to keep that in mind as well. So having a little color underneath, little small highlighted lines, and that comes down the road. But to show the moisture, it does become significant in creating the illusion of something wet. It's not going to dry fast enough for me. In light of, the amount of time we have here. But keeping in mind, using the Venetian red, and the reason why you have this line across here, there's always a shadow, cast shadow from their eyelids, because if the light's coming in a direction, you have that cast shadow going in. That's part of it. All right, so there's some blending going on with that, especially that the light falling in a certain area, so you indicate that. I have a habit of watching television. When I watch television, I look at eyes and I look at all of the highlights in the eyes to see where the lights are coming from. Sometimes the two light source, you can see that and picture that. And of course, all of the highlights in the face, when you look at a picture, you can see what light's stronger than the other, what's the main light, and what's the lesser light. And then also you look for areas where there's crescent light. And it's really cool. I do that a lot whenever I watch television. As a matter of fact, I love movies and things like that because you see the color schemes in the movies. And it's just that you see how colors work together. So all of that. CSI Miami, to me, that's like the best show for color. I watch that show all of the time, and I'm just fascinated how they make all these lights, all the colors work. All right, so I'm gonna move on to another part. I think we're running out of time to go next door. I'm gonna move on to one area too that's very important, like the nape of the lips on the corners. There's a little dimple that goes here, and it all depends on how the lip is shaped. But I love the transition that happens with the lip that goes in on the corners and so forth, and trying to create that when I paint. That's one of the fun things in life for me, really. So I'm just going to paint a little bit of this in there. Of course, the three-dimensional areas of that. There's certain areas that actually goes a little deeper than other areas, and generally it's where you have more space in between the lip ridges. Yeah, I go through these decision makings all the time. What brush should I use? All right, so it's very red, so I'm gonna, to create the illusion, sometimes too you can just dabble with the red and go in there and blend it. And right away you start to see things happen with that. If I was to go even whiter, you'll see, and these aren't highlights, I'm probably gonna blend this later. So I'm just going to put where I see a transition in the lip between the top and the bottom. And of course, generally, there's a different chromatic change that happens at the bottom lip than the top lip, the top of the bottom lip. So, you know, it all depends on how light fall on it. And usually there's a reflection at the bottom, the top ridge of the bottom lip, that's generally here. That also helps. But as you blend, things come together. Now, of course, the corners are also going to have some sort of a transitional situation going on there that kind of dictates the panting of the lips. All right, I'll work on the bottom. Just trying to work quickly to actually give you an idea of how I work. So that's really in a nutshell. What do they call it? It's a fun name they like to call it the Crimson Line or so. The Vermilion Line, and I get into all of these these names that they call these parts of the lip and the facial anatomy. I'll go lighter. I'll make this blue because the transition of blue, adding a cool to a warm kind of creates a lot of interesting things happening. So the vermilion border, I'm just going to kind of indicate some stuff with that. And usually the corners of the lips here, like I said, it curves in. So it's usually a little lighter, with less chroma, less information. This particular one, the ridge is right there, so. And for powdering, if you look at the picture, this area here, anatomically, these are a group of muscles that's here, and you can basically see them. So that you can see them with they're kind of with the highlights that's surrounding it. It kind of shows you how it's laid out. And not to mention too, and the other thing I should have pointed out was also she's kind of has her face down a little bit like this. And so the light is actually a little different, and the anatomical features of her face is different too. She's got lesser of a chin and more of a nose, a longer nose. So seeing that in the process kind of gives you an idea of what's what. Now these are areas that I love to work, all right? The flesh tones and everything else, trying to create the depth of the face and the fleshiness of it, I should say fleshiness of the face. It's all a lot of fun for me, but generally I like working to create the illusion of depth in these areas. Lately, I've been fascinated with the ridges of the lips, the way that all of these things here happen. And people stylize this a lot. And I generally stay away from stylizing because I try to be as close to the pictures I possibly can. But I do also understand, and I say this all the time,